Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen, to the Philosophy of Art and Science. As always, if you support these programs, you can head over to patreon.com/Tewahedo. That's patreon.com/TWAHIDO. You can also join the YouTube channel directly at either $1 a month or $5 a month. Today, our special guest is Dcn Tesfa Mikael, also known as Rowan Williams. Welcome to the program, brother.
Thank you, Deacon Henok. Yeah, glad to be with you today. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so very happy to be with you today.
Thank you so much. በጣም እናመሰግናለን. And I thought we would start on a kind of biographical note. I would think that a number of my audience knows who you are because you've been at this for quite a while. I'm sure longer than me. And I've been at it for a while now too. But there are certainly going to be people who don't know. So you'll forgive me if I have you repeating things that you've said on other programs you've been on. But we'll try to have our unique aspects as well. How did you come to be a deacon in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church? How did you find this gem? Because I want to imagine that you weren't born in the church. Of course, you were born again in the church.
Yes, that's right. I was born again in the church. Thanks be to God.
Amen.
So my story in brief. I mean, you can hurry me along if I get into some side points and it's not so interesting. But I was raised in an agnostic family. I mean, I'd say my parents were agnostic Anglicans. So church was really just a kind of cultural thing that they did rather than an expression of faith or belief, anything along those lines. So you're talking about going to church, Christmas once a year. That's really it. And then we had religious assembly, but very much Church of England. As the culture was more predominantly, at that time during the 1980s. So I grew up in that environment. There was no mention of God or that kind of thing, scripture or related matters at home growing up. It was really when I, got to secondary school or, high school for the American audience that I began to, delve a little deeper. We have religious education, so sort of learning about other faiths as well. Religious education is generally a multi-faith kind of subject that we take at secondary school. I got very interested in the Rastafari movement at that age, and also the community or the people that I was socializing with at that time also really kind of inspired me to follow in that track. And it was due to that I got into the Rastafari movement, and not just any kind of Rastafarian, but a specific house or mansion within the Rastafari movement, which is known as the Babsanti house.
I'm familiar with that one. That one is a little bit more priestly than some of the others, right? Because some of the people kind of who assess the movement think of it as one blob, or some people might think of Christianity in that way too if they don't know the particulars. But right. Could you say a little bit about how this house is different? Because I've met people from Babsanti as well as from the 12 tribes, and I've noticed differences just between those two, and I'm sure there are plenty of houses that even I don't know about.
Yeah, well, I mean, the three houses are the main ones, so Babsanti, Nyabingi, and 12 tribes of Israel. The Ethiopian World Federation is not really a house because it's really a kind of I would say black nationalist organization. So you can be Seventh-day Adventist and be a member of the Ethiopian World Federation rather. But yeah, to get back to your question about the Babsanti house, yes, it's more priestly. So the initiated members are called prophets and priests, right? The leader is or was King Emmanuel, and King Emmanuel, Charles Edwards. You know, the Babsanti would say, you know, nobody knows who his parents were, but you know, he arrived on the scene. Let's say the Nyabingi scene in the early part of the 20th century, and led a significant movement within the Rastafari movement itself. So you know, he led a group of Bobo to you know, establish their own camp. Firstly around Kingston, and later on, you know, not too far, about 10 miles away from Kingston, in what's known as Bull Bay. So it's a kind of monastic, in a sense, monastic kind of settlement in the hills, and it's, you know, there's continually service, you know, night and day throughout the day, reading psalms and then chanting through the night certain times of the year. So it's very liturgical in its expression, and you know, they're also known for being quite extreme in some senses, you know. So it's a black supremacy movement. So black supremacy in righteousness of salvation is one of the mantras, if you like, one of the points that they really emphasize. So you could say that, you know, went from black supremacy to Orthodox Christianity. But you know, that's the Babsanti order in a nutshell. Is yes, it's kind of removed from society, so they really don't want to be mixed up, polluted by Babylon. Although, you know, many of the members travel into the city every week. You know, especially to sell brooms. They're known for selling brooms, and you know, their self-reliance. They make the brooms there, the camp, and they go out to sell them. So it's very much, you know, self-reliance, and then, as I say, the liturgical cycle of the day and the week as well. The Sabbath is also very important, and repatriation is really one of the points that they highlight. So
to Shashamane.
Well, Shashamane, yes, but yeah.
I just know that the king had given a plot of land to, I guess, anyone who had wanted to repatriate at the time, right?
That's right, yeah. But this also, yeah, goes back to the point I made, that with them being viewed as a little more extreme, in that they don't like sort of mixing with the other groups to some extent. You know, they have their own doctrine and so forth, and you know, they like to keep that pure, as it were, and
reminiscent of the Dead Sea Scrolls community, the Qumran community, the Essenes, where they would be categorized as Jews at the time, but you know, they set themselves kind of apart with their own prayer protocol and everything else.
Yes, yeah, no, that's an interesting comparison. So yeah, I mean, the focus was always Addis, but and also there was a mission sent to Nigeria and to Ghana, you know, in the time of King Emmanuel. I think you're talking in the early 70s. Yeah, the Babsanti movement, Babsanti order is kind of known for that, you know, being slightly exclusive, and Shashamane was something that came into the picture because of necessity, you know, because they weren't able to really maintain, my understanding, the life in Addis during the time of the Derg and so forth. So they were kind of compelled to, you know, turn to their brothers and sisters who were living in Shashamane, i.e. the you know, other Rasta of the Nyabingi and the 12 tribes of Israel, and you know, non conformist, shall we say, or the Rasta who don't belong to any particular house. So
yeah, it's fascinating. You know, you didn't have just some sort of cursory knowledge of this, and now I'm curious about the type of educational setting, because you know, one of my other interests to an extent, I think we have a few grade schools in Ethiopia, and you might know this better than I do. I've heard of Miskaya Zunan as well as Qudus Selassie in the capital city, Addis Ababa, having grade schools attached to it. But I have a dream where each diocese, if not every parish, would have, some sort of micro school where we're educating our children. In the United States, it's very common for various Protestant denominations, but most famously the Roman Catholic Church to be having these institutes. And frankly, even in Ethiopia, I know many people who are believers who grew up in Adventist churches or in Roman Catholic churches or even Pentecostal because they had these grade schools attached. But it has me curious now. You said it was an agnostic Anglican household. I know the Anglican Church has, I don't know if it was the case in the 80s, this low church and high church services, low church being kind of more evangelical, sometimes maybe even like a charismatic church, whereas high church would be very approximate to Orthodox if the dogmatics, itself would be off. I'm wondering if which of those settings it was, and then were they teaching, for example, Rastafarianism as one of the religions? If so, I would be very surprised and intrigued by that educational model.
Yes. So the first question, it was certainly low church. What would be deemed low church? However, you're not talking about just some people coming together in a town hall or a church, in a hall or something, like many evangelicals would. They have no kind of particular veneration of the building. It's very much lots of say images. They're not really icons, but stained glass, the saints, and that's all very much part of it. The ancient buildings go back hundreds of years, and although it's not really high church, the kind of churches that I went to as a child, it's still not kind of low evangelical, almost non-denominational, in a sense. So that was your first question. Sorry, your second one about the Rastafari movement.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if you learned about the movement through this sort of, you said this kind of universalist religion that they were teaching, or was it kind of your independent inquiry?
Well, I'd say both. It was kind of just the situation in which I found myself. So the social network in which I found myself led me to, as I say, be inspired to pursue it at a higher level. So, I was very much interested in reading more about it. And, you could go to the library and get books at that time. And yes, it was actually included in some of the material at high school, secondary school. There was some kind of rudimentary information that I was provided with at school. I'd say when you say the kind of universalist religion, I mean, obviously, they're not, the schools here are not looking to indoctrinate people. It's a kind of secular school system. Yeah. Although, I did go to one Christian school, Protestant, Church of England school. But yeah, they're not obviously trying to indoctrinate anybody there. They're trying to give you a kind of objective view of, the world religions. Although the subject itself, religious education, came out of the government and the church wanting a Christian nation after the war. It was established in the 40s, okay? And then it was only by the 60s that questions started to be asked about other religions, what about the others? And, there are lots of, Indians and other nationalities in the country, that it shouldn't be just, us teaching them about the Bible and so on. So that's, religious education, really made me want to dig deeper in my reading, and that's what I did. But also, I'd say the experiences, social experiences, the kind of networks that I was involved in, and so on, really gave me the inspiration, like the kind of cultural scene during the 90s, you know, was jungle music. Yeah, before drum and bass was jungle, and you know, it's very much kind of influenced by what we call now bashment dancehall. Would say, you know, ragga, back in the in the 90s.
Yeah, and it's that has become itself more popular, I think, over the past 10 years or so. In the sense of, I think it was more of a subculture before, whereas you see some very mainstream environments now that are maybe even some people feeling culturally appropriating it. You know, that's some of the language that is in use when something that is a subculture gets, you know, makes it into the mainstream consciousness. I'm so fascinated. By the way, I think you were worried about us going down rabbit holes or an aside. I think this whole show, the beauty of it is, you know, I come in with some sort of big themes and motif thoughts, but really, I think the organic way in which you learned and got to the place that you are right now is the way I think education happens the best. And so I'm pursuing even the conversation in that way pedagogically. And the traditional school, the Abennet in Ethiopia, it's so fascinating having conversations with, for example, the administrator of my parish, who's a monk, a Quamos, as well as our bishop, who's also, of course, a monk. And they told me that as young as 10 years old and 13 years old, they left their families and their home. And at that point, it's not as if the church imposes step 1, step 2, step 3 in terms of curriculum. If you think about it, if you told it to an educator, they would think you're insane. But you're giving 10-year-olds and 13-year-olds 100% control over their curriculum. Now, they're not making things up because they're in a relatively controlled environment. The environment is prepared for them, the various schools of learning. They have the Qane, they have the Qaddasi, they have the Mahalit, the various poetry and chanting schools. But they really get to choose wherever they go. Sometimes they're with somebody for 3 months. Sometimes they're there for 5 years and they replace that person. And it's fascinating because without having grown up in that tradition, you emulated it somehow. And I think it's good for us to reflect on this because sometimes we have, you know, pious parents like you and I would be, right? And the children aren't able to replicate the piety. And sometimes I've seen this happen frequently in the United States. I don't know if it's the same in the UK. And so the question is, you know, do you try to raise them secularishly so they rebel against you and become pious? Because you grew up in a relatively secular home. I grew up in the same environment. My parents have never consistently gone to church in their life. And I would say, you know, they baptized me. They took me to the major high holidays of the church. But that was really more of like a cultural homage. And because I still had grandparents and grandaunts alive that would probably eat them if they didn't do that. You know, they had, if not the fear of God, the fear of older family members that compelled them to do that. But really, I was raised in an agnostic home as well. And so you and I have achieved this level in a sense, if you view it that way. I don't know. If you don't, you can tell me, rebelling against the agnosticism for this organized religion in the 21st century. And so one of the questions I wonder is, you know, if we want to foster people like us, you know, how do we approach that medium? I don't know if you've thought about it in raising your kids or in the community that you're working there at Sarhas Eon.
Okay, so I think it's important, you know, as you mentioned, within the Abennet setting for children to have some degree of understanding as to what their particular charisms, their particular skills, or the natural direction that they to follow in life in terms of education and also piety. I think that's really important, you know, and I think, it just naturally comes out when you're provided with the right environment. So for myself, raising my own girls, I think it's important to simply, provide the environment, and not to kind of compel anyone to do anything. Of course, God doesn't compel us, doesn't force us to believe, right? So, taking the example of our Lord, and really, I would say that it's important to at least open the door, and to let them experience as much as possible, and to educate them as to what is available, and how they could pursue, and really just listen to children, and pursue the conversations to find out what it is, the kind of questions that they're asking, and really try to dig deeper, and help them understand, help them make their own decisions. So yeah, that would be my take on raising youth as a parent within the church. So yeah, I'm very much with you on that.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a beautiful balance to prepare the environment, like you said, and it's our job to sow, and how the seed grows, we leave that up to God, but we do our duty. And part of the duty you felt in this draw is to go and learn yourself. So how did you know where to go? Did someone instruct you how to learn or how to pursue studies in the church?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. When I was first baptized, so we missed the whole kind of lead up to orthodoxy, but when after I was baptized, I just wanted to learn more, to find out what's out there. I could obviously see that there's not a great deal in the English language in the bookshops, the bookstores in Addis Ababa. So I just kind of branched out and tried to speak to as many well-informed people, clergymen, and scholars as possible. And one of the first things that I heard was about the Holy Trinity Theological College. So I just turned up there. I just went down and to find somebody to speak to. And the Zabenya, he just pointed me to the the office of former Abba Haile Mariam Melissa. So currently Abuna Aragawi, His Eminence Abuna Aragawi, and he was more than happy to welcome me into his office, and I expressed I'm learning some Amharic as well as the doctrines of the church. And, oh yes, come and sit down, and we'll go through. I had the book, I forget the title now. It's the one with order of worship, ecumenical relations. It's Amharic and English, front and back.
Is it Fatanagast?
No, not Fatanagast. It's produced by the church. It was in the time of I think it started under Abuna Mercorios and finished under Abuna Paulos. So it included lots of the scholars like Megabi Bului, Sefer Selassie, and quite a lot of the scholars from the Kubai and so forth, and it was translated into English. It was actually the World Council of Churches that requested that document be produced. So we went through that. It starts with the existence of God, and the 5 pillars of mystery, and 7 sacraments, and all this. And he took me through it. I actually had kind of catechism whilst in Shashamani, just because I was interested in reading the Bible in Amharic beforehand. But yeah, as I say, it was after I was baptized that I just started to go out, into the world and start to ask the questions. My interest, and led by the Holy Spirit, I would say. So that was one way. But also, more specifically, there's priest here who's been in UK for more than 40 years now. Lika Brahanat Gabor Georgis. He came over here during the imperial regime and remained here. And he advised me personally. Yeah, he said, go for the degree at Holy Trinity Theological College, and that's basically. I didn't look back from there. I just put all my energy into that, and thanks be to God. He brought it to fruition, brought it to completion. I graduated in 2014. So yeah, from 2010 to 2014, I was there at the theological college, and that's really how I managed to go there, with just speaking to as many of the fathers and scholars as possible.
That's wonderful. And they conduct their courses there in English or in Amharic?
Yeah, the medium of education, communication is mostly in English, actually, officially. However, officially, you might have the handouts in English sometimes, and nearly all the conversation is we read a page from the handout and then discuss it all in Amharic. So it might say that the church history is in English, right? But we read the material and then we discuss it in Amharic. So I had to kind of get with it fairly quickly there with regards to the language, and also because it's obviously designed for Ethiopians. Most of the Amharic subjects are put at the front. So like Hadis Kidan, Buli Kidan, Ene, all of these things are right at the beginning. So in a sense, it was kind of I was dropped in the deep end.
Yeah.
And my grades improved a bit more, the further down the line I got with regard to the subjects that were actually in English. Mostly English. I think they say it's around 3/4 or 2/3 is supposed to be in English, and the rest in Amharic.
That's right. And I've heard other people who've learned the language, and it's hard for me to say because Amharic was my first language in the home. So it's hard for me to even judge the level of difficulty, for example. But a lot of our texts are in Ge'ez as well, and we've mentioned this. It's the language of the church, whereas Amharic is the vernacular. Did learning Ge'ez seem easier or not than Amharic, or vice versa? Even when you mentioned reading the Bible, this desire to read the Bible in Amharic, I smiled because I think when my parents were born, around that time is when the Bible was first printed in Amharic. And even in those first few years, people in our church, wrongly a lot of time, would be very skeptical of that translation. It came top down. It was the emperor's decision to translate into Amharic. The church kind of on its own, although he was a figure of the church in a sense, hadn't come to that conclusion yet. There were the Terugwame Beit had the interpretations in Amharic, but oftentimes the biblical text was preserved in Ge'ez. And some people tell me that the grammar of Ge'ez is kind of closer to English for them than Amharic, and just in terms of the order of verbs and nouns and such. Did you find one easier or harder, or were you just able to just get through both of them? You talk about how they threw you in the deep end. Well, thank God you didn't sink. You've been thriving, and we're going to get into some of your publications as well, which is what I would like to promote here and have people make sure they purchase them and read and really live a life of prayer, because you've dedicated yourself to filling in this gap that you saw. It's not like you had some preconceived notion of what your ministry was going to look like, but you adapted. You say, hey, there aren't these things. We need these things.
That's right. Yeah. Your question about the Bible is really interesting. I mean, because we still haven't got one complete Bible in Ge'ez, right? That we have 81 books, Samanya Wahadu books. And last time I spoke to the Ligawan the Patriarchate, they told me that was a project, to complete the Bible. So okay, we still
I
haven't,
have the
yeah.
New Testament. They have printed the New Testament officially from the Synod, whereas before, I think it was some Catholic Right press in Asmara that they had a printing press because of the Italians over there. And I had seen that. They have the Samantu Behera Orit, which is the first 8 books of the Bible plus Jubilees. That's what I've seen in print. I haven't seen anything else in print. And then you have to just buy everything else individually. Like I think if you buy the Andimta books, you can find the text. But like you said, there's no one bound 81 book one. And people ask me all the time for an English version, and I try to explain to them that there's no Ge'ez version, let alone an English version, like commercially available.
Right, yeah, and even you mentioned the New Testament in Ge'ez, which thank God that's available, and you can find the PDF online, the Platt edition. But still, we haven't got the 8 books of Church Order, the Clementine Octateuch. You mentioned the Octateuch of the Old Testament, of the prophet Moses, the Octateuch of Moses, but the Clementine Octateuch is also very important, and that's certainly not included in the published edition of the New Testament. So I think we still have a way to go there. But no, to get back to your question, which was which language I found easier. I found Amharic a lot easier when I actually went through the Ge'ez courses at seminary, theological college. So I realized, okay, this is a structure and this is how you learn it. Okay, it makes sense, because I just don't jump straight in with a dictionary and just speaking to people and, then kind of worked it out. And, what does C mean? Okay, yeah, it's about time. And Li, okay, it's conditional. And, eventually you just kind of get the grasp of it that way. But, kind of looking at it from the perspective of the traditional education system, the way that Ge'ez is taught. Well, it's Genibet. We had Geni on one side and Ge'ez on the other side. So it was, Ge'ez, the Amharic translation in the last semester, and before that, mostly it was grammar and so on. So, Amharic was a lot easier after I'd studied Ge'ez, because it gave me that kind of straightforward system of learning, which I hadn't had the first time round. So I very much appreciated that. And then I tried to replicate it with Tigrinya, although I think I might have sunk when I was thrown in the deep end there. I mean,
it's okay. Gize allo zahawe. I'm on that Tigrinya learning journey as well. So we can struggle through that one together. Amen. So you graduated, and not that long ago, relative to how productive you've been in producing works. I know I'm supposed to be getting it later this week because of the pandemic. It's been a while, but a friend of mine purchased for me the prayer book that you have of the daily prayers. Can you tell us about that publication, just in terms of what's in it? And, for the sake of the audience, I think some of the people may not know. So please let us know a lot about that publication.
Right, yeah. So it's called Daily Prayers of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. That's my title. The texts that are included in it are what are known as Galtimert, which is they're the prayers that you learn by rote. You repeat these prayers over and over, and you memorize them. So Gal meaning sort of memorization in that sense. Of course, Gal means word, but yeah, in that sense, it's a kind of education by memorization. So the prayers are the daily prayers. So you need to know these prayers for most of the services, Wudasim Mariam, Melka Maria, Melka Jesus, these prayers are prayed all the time, so you need to remember them all. However, I produced it in English. And the reason why I produced it in English is because our Kasagebes Haile Meskel Samuels really persisted in pushing me to do it. He first approached me when I was in my dissertation year, 2019. And I said, no, I'm doing my dissertation, Father. No chance I'm going to be, producing a prayer book. And then I got a call back the next week. No, we need the prayer book. so he just pushed me, and okay, I was like, okay, yeah, this is obviously clearly something I need to do. So I just did it. I mean, I had an old translation from, I'd say, maybe around 2013, 2014. So I just reproduced it and made it accessible for our members, especially here at Ration. The prayer book that we had, was just Wadasi Mariam No, Ankat Brahan, Yuwedis Wamelagt, just the opening prayers, Salat Wetter. That was all we had really. So I wanted to bring it into the 21st century, the text that we had, because, Wallace Budge's translation of Wadasi Mariam is Elizabethan English, was in the Elizabethan English, the D and Thou, and, all of that. So, and these were conversations that I'd had with the clergy before I left for seminary, that we need to update the language gradually and, move forward in that way. So, I just did a fresh translation of all the texts of what we call Galtamert. So there are 6 parts. There's what we called common prayer, Wadasi Mariam, the veneration of Our Lady Mary. Some prefer praises. Praises is more universal, I suppose. In the catalogs and so on, you'll find praises of Mary. But I prefer veneration. Praise can generally, I've seen dictionaries that say praise can be for the saints generally. You find praise for in the sense of worship, praise in the sense of worship. So veneration of Mary, Wadasi Mariam, Ankat Brahan, the gate of light, Yuwedis Wamelagt. The angels venerated her. Melka Mariam, Melka Jesus. So the milk of Mary, the milk of Jesus. So the milk genre is, I'm sure you've mentioned it on your program before. I think somebody mentioned it to me that you've been discussing, the meaning of milk as image. And also
it's a hard word to translate. It's a very hard word to translate in that context.
Yeah. So I take it in the sense that I think it's the 4th definition or the 3rd definition that Kidanawil gives in his dictionary, which is that it's a technical term for the piece of hymnography.
Mm-hmm.
So you find, for example, in Byzantine liturgy, stikarion, and they just take the Greek words instead of stikarion means something to do with a rod. Instead of translating that word as rod,
they choose to transliterate. Yeah, this is the common. This is why people have to study original languages. This is when my sister was a linguist very briefly in college, she came up with this Italian phrase one time, and she was telling me about it, that they had this tradition where they said the translator is the traitor. And I thought that was hilarious because I'm a translator and interpreter, and you are as well. But there's a sense in which people just need to pursue the original languages. But the reality is they're not doing that. And so that's why we have to translate it. And those decisions are always difficult, and everyone is going to have different points of view on when to do it, when not to do it. For example, it is common to have most names in Scripture transliterated in the way that you said. And sometimes when you have the double transliteration, that's how we get the name Jesus, because it's originally Joshua, but it gets transliterated twice, and that's how we miss the connection between Jesus and Joshua because of a double transliteration that happens at one point. James in the English tradition is supposed to be Jacob, but again, because of the nature of how people select what to translate and transliterate, the whole movements in the United States, like the Jehovah's Witness, sometimes people will translate "I am that I am," in which case you don't need anything, whereas some people have the reverence and they'll spell the consonants of the Lord's name without the vowels. And some people will add the vowels. Some people make it a Y. Some people make it a J. Some people make it a W, a V. Every jot and tittle has a selection. But yes, I'm with you in the case that I think some things, if you leave to transliteration, like I haven't pushed it logically, but I think, for example, maybe even the word "Exabhier," when transliterated from Ge'ez to Amharic, they never translated it. They never said "Behirawi Getachin," which people think is funny when I say it because it sounds ridiculous in Amharic. Even the "B'Sema Ab Wa'Weld Wa'Manfas Kadus Ahad Wa'Amlag," they never said "Ba'abbatsim, Balijusim, Baliyu Manfasusim." Nobody's ever said that. And I've said that to people to demonstrate to them that they know a little bit of Ge'ez already, in the sense that there are some things that maintain that. So you're saying that Melk is one of those things that maybe just leave it alone and people will understand that it's a genre of hymnography technically?
Yeah, so in the one of the more recent prints publications of the prayer book, I included a glossary because I realized that there are a lot of youth using these books. Originally, didn't conceive of it as a youth prayer book. So I use technical language like hypostatically, which even some of the clergy, might wrestle with now and then. To explain certain words like, what does Abuna mean, and, what is Tewahedo, and, all of these words that, we transliterate. Melk, again, is a technical term for a kind of hymn, rather than,
that usually is venerating, or if you want to use a different term, the various body parts of the image of the right. Like, I think there is some root to it, but like you said, it comes on to take on a new technical term meaning.
Yes, yeah. So it includes the subject as well. So it's called Melk for a certain reason, because it's talking about the all the images, the hair of the head and the eyebrows and so on and so forth. It speaks about the image of the person. But you also have like Melka Korban, the milk of the Eucharist, where that's certainly not the same kind of thing. So it's a name of a certain genre of hymn, as I've understood. But yeah, generally, it's either the Godhead, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, the Holy Trinity, Our Lady Mary, the angels, the righteous, all the different categories of saint. And the hymn venerates the different body parts, as well as certain elements from the saint's life. But I'm sure you'll have our brother Augustine.
Yes, I need to. We need our schedules to match and give him some time to get acclimated to his new home in Europe. There, I got to spend one day with you all in the reading group that he was organizing in studying various Melk. I just wondered if you wanted to share some thoughts on that experience as well, and getting to read internationally with people in this Ge'ez tradition.
Right, that was a real blessing. I've kind of always envisaged, working together with others. So translations, generally, they're not a one-man job. Especially liturgical translations. They're normally translated by committee, or especially nowadays in the modern era, in in ancient times, potentially more of individual translation, but nowadays, it is viewed as something that you need to approach more collectively. So that was a real blessing to have the the reading group, the Melk reading group, and we took on Melka Arvaitun Sasa, so the Melk of the four living creatures, that was such an interesting one to delve into, and finding all of the material from Enoch and throughout Scripture where it mentions the cherubim. It was such a
That's right. That's a good point, because that's one of the points I remember you and I discussing, because it's harder for people at first to understand the four living creatures. Sometimes they call them the four living beasts, are from Revelation, but they also kind of mirror in Ezekiel, and as you said, in the liturgical texts and extra the Awarid Mas'aftu, the extra books, we see them in various corpuses within the church. The thing about them is some of the people, like you said, are interpreting them from the church point of view as other cherubim or cherubim, like other specific type of angels, the ones usually depicted as the chubby-cheeked babies in the Western tradition, and the heads with wings attached to their head with big eyes, and in the Ethiopian tradition of artwork, whereas I think some people were just viewing them as independent entities. And so even myself, I didn't have full clarity on the interpretation tradition of them. So that was a new experience for me in learning and reading with you.
Okay, well, that was a real blessing to have you with us. Thankfully, we managed to complete it. We just need to review it before we can hopefully have it printed. So that is the plan. To have these books there for the faithful, for the laity, the clergy, all the members of the church, to actually pray these texts, and have communion with the saints, have communion with the angels. That's really got to be the focus. And I really respect the more academic side of it as well. I think we have to. I'm reminded of Pope John Paul's breathing with two lungs for some reason, but have both the academic side and the side of devotion, piety.
Yeah.
So
you mean in terms of like parsing manuscripts and seeing what is the true text, quote unquote, by comparing the oldest available manuscripts.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. You hit the nail on the head there. It's it's invaluable work that people like Augustine are doing there, to really go through all the manuscripts and find the earliest witnesses right through to books that are printed in the 21st century that have completely different traditions, that have continued probably in the oral tradition and so on and so forth, and and all of that. So it's a real joy to be able to do that work now. And we have so many resources now. Even when I started, as I say, around 10 years ago, when I went to seminary, around 11 years ago now, there was a lot less, and now it's really starting to sort of increase. So
we had one book from His Eminence, who passed away. I also sometimes say His Beatitude, Abuna Melchizedek, who passed away earlier this year. He fell asleep with the Lord. Long time giant in our church. He had his book, The Teaching on the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and I think that was like the sole English book that we had available at our parish. And so I've done a number of ad hoc translations of, for example, Zawter Tzalot. I think we had the Budge copy of Wuddasi Mariam. So we've spread kind of the daily prayers and the praise of Mary in that way, but to sort of like systematically go through everything and provide texts that could be used for catechesis. I mean, we don't we did not really have that, but these things they're new and they're burgeoning. So I am hopeful, and like you said, using both lungs to breathe is very powerful, especially because in Semitic languages and other ancient languages, the breath is tied to the soul and the spirit. I always tell people how the same sirwakal in Ge'ez, you have stinfas, nafas, and manfas, all together, and so there is some connection between all of those things there in what animates us and what moves us. And during this new plague of ours, you've had an opportunity to work on another publication, is that right, about the miracles of Mary?
Yes. So the miracles of Our Lady Mary, Tamar Mariam, and also Tamar Jesus, miracles of our Lord. Tamar Jesus is actually something that I began as when I returned from seminary 2014, and gradually started to complete it now. I'd say about 3/4 of the way through the whole thing. But the project that I've been working on is to unite the miracles with the lectionary Mitzvah Getzawi, a project that I've been working on. Is to have a printed lectionary. You might see lots of.
Tell us about that. Some people don't know. Some people don't know the lectionary is the schedule of readings. Can you say a little bit about that? I've used that word around people before, and they looked at me funny.
Okay. The two main parts of the lectionary are the sanctoral and the temporal. And the temporal is the part of the lectionary that I've on most. So that's the readings from New Testament plus the Psalm versicle or Musbach, which is chanted by the deacon and by the whole congregation during the Divine Liturgy Gadasi. It includes the readings from the New Testament and the Psalm, which is chanted. And also you'll find the Mezmor from the Digwaf, so the hymnary of St. Yared. It's focuses, the temporal part focuses on themes mostly for the liturgical season that we find ourselves in a given time in the liturgical year. We're in the season of resurrection, coming toward the end of the season of resurrection, and we'll proceed to Astimro, which are the season of imploration for mercy, and then Kremt, which is the rainy season, and so on. So the various seasons of the year have different themes, and I've kind of undertaken this original work, which no one's done before, of uniting the reading, the passages, chapters, and so on from Tamar Mariam and Tamar Jesus with the theme for the day. Sometimes days that take place within the liturgical year, the season, and what I've tried to do include all the miracles, so we don't have to sort of flick around. Often you see clergy kind of just picking up the book and sort of dipping straight into it.
Yeah, I have noticed that. I've always found it curious. You've raised a brilliant point in talking about the originality of what you're trying to do, is that I've noticed that there's this tradition of reading from the miracles of Mary and the miracles of Jesus. There's also various gadlat or other dirsanat that, depending on the parish, I've seen different parishes have different rules, sometimes based off of the name of the parish, but sometimes not even based off the name of the parish. It might be, the personal piety of that priest. It really, it doesn't seem to And why I say that is it's not written in the lectionary. You don't see it written in the lectionary. It doesn't tell you what to read, whereas everything else is almost in excruciating detail. If you want to, express individuality, it is crushing your individuality and showing you the church has her voice, and it tells you every single thing what you're supposed to read. And yet, like you're saying, with the tradition of some of these other books, it doesn't tell you what to read at all. So that is definitely another gap that you were able to locate in the tradition as you're widening the range of texts available in the English language.
Okay, so the lectionary that we have within our church, there's not just one lectionary, we should say, to begin with. There are various traditions, and when we look back at the manuscript evidence, we have manuscripts dating back to the 14th century, 14th or 15th century. However, there was one complete lectionary until 20th century.
That's right. The Leibate and the Klatschbate, the upper houses and the lower houses, until they were consolidated and finalized and got the kind of final stamp of approval in the church. I mean, that goes to a larger point of people have asked me, how do saints get canonized in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church? It seems the Roman Catholics, for example, have a very sort of structured, organized way, whereas ours, it doesn't seem to be very top down. It's more bottom up in terms of someone becomes a local hero, and more and more people hear about them, and it seems like the lectionary is similar in that regard. Like, it wasn't some king or some patriarch who it wasn't a patriarch of Alexandria who said this is the lectionary, or it wasn't any of the kings, as far as I know, but kind of local traditions gathering until they consolidate. Is that fair from your understanding as well?
Yeah, that's fair. Just because there was some noise outside that I didn't want to include in the video, but I think you're quite right there. There are various traditions of interpretation. The common traditions, so the chant school, and so on. So they all contribute in their own way, to producing a final, a completed work, such as a lectionary. So you read about in some of the research that's been done on the lectionary. Scholars just saying, read this today, read that. It's basically done from memory. But then, it's only in the 20th century that you find a completed book called Metzafa Getawi with all the commemorations for the whole year, the 365, 366 days, the sanctuary, that's the calendar of saints days throughout the year, and also the temporal, which is, as I said, the part which I've focused on mostly for the Sunday readings and Sunday lessons. So that you only find that in the 20th century. So my own work is not completely a work of complete innovation. It's based within the tradition, and I've looked at various ways that the miracle chosen before. So looking at some of the modes that have rubrics in them and state that certain miracles should be read at a certain time, and ask the question, why that has been chosen. The miracles themselves, the manuscripts of and Tamariyes, but also books like Metzafa Gebrahe Mamat, which includes the readings of the miracles for various hours, and looking at why certain miracles have been selected, and the kind of approach that the scholars have taken to compiling that kind of work, and really taking that thought of the fathers and running with it to produce something that we don't have to just flick around in a book for 30 seconds before we approach.
And just in case anyone thought that your ability to not feel fatigue was over, we have more, and that is that you're also examining the Sa'atat, or the Liturgy of the Hours, which is something that I have been looking at myself, and looking at a few different manuscripts, but also looking at some of the new materials that they've been printing. Again, it's one of those things that I see discrepancies even in the modern. The modern church is not consolidated on that. I've seen at least 2 different variants. I think there's a Shoah variant and a Debre Abbai. Debre Abbai is, of course, in Tigray on the border with Gondar, there on the Tekeze River. So I've seen 2 variants at least. I don't know which one is it. Did you just take a modern translation, or are you looking at the manuscripts for the Sa'atat as well?
Okay, so yeah, no, with the Sa'atat, we started with a kind of hodgepodge mixture of the 2, which is, I think, unfortunate. So over the years, I've tried to purify the tradition so that we're just working with one tradition. Either, it's got to be the Selikula or Debre Abbai. And as the current Archdeacon Liturgical Dcn is serving at Dcn. Now he went to Ethiopia and studied at Zuwai, the monastery, and he learned Debre Zema there in the Kadasi Bet training that he received. So yeah, we've gradually started to move more towards Debre Abbai, and there's a very good edition of the Debre Abbai Sa'atat Abad Umalasan. I forget his surname, but yeah, Abad Umman, former Lika Sultanat, now Lika Likawand, serving at Boli Madhani Alim, Debre Salim Madhani Alim. So yeah, his book is basically what we've been working with, not looking at manuscripts and so on, and just the parts that I've called Matins and Vespers. Right.
Yeah,
so about
can you tell us about that in identifying? Because I've had, again, friends of the Greek tradition trying to compare and say, for example, like, one of the issues I've come into of defining or matching what is Matins or what is Vespers is that, as far as I know, the antiphonary, the Dugwa, and the Sa'atat almost have the same role in being prayers for all times of the day. And I've heard of some larger cathedrals on the one side they pray the Dugwa, and the other side they pray the Sa'atat, so that kind of all the prayers are happening simultaneously. So it's been hard for me to answer that question. How is it that which part are you referring to as a Matins and which the Vespers?
Right. Yes. I think it's the more competitions and so on requires a lot more clergy or manpower in terms of cantor. So it's more common just to have the matins from the raising of incense in the chants with Teresi Mayam, Melkas, our readings of the miracles, as we mentioned, Liton, Melkawadase, and so on. Yeah, it's that's the service I'm calling Matins, as it's the more common tradition. Yeah, and then Vespers again, mostly known for Maharana Ab, but there are other litanies and responses and so on that are included in that, in addition to the reading of the Holy Gospel. and some vertical, as we mentioned earlier. So those are the two services that I'm focusing on, and specifically the Debrabai tradition.
Yes, and that's I have the same from the same father, the lectionary that we use both at my parish and then me personally at home. It's the same exact print book that I have. So it must be other parishes that perhaps are using a Sedat Kullah or maybe even something else that that I don't know about. So that's wonderful. And you mentioned our brother, the Archdeacon Amdas Ion. Perhaps we'll have to invite him on the program too. I'm familiar with him. I know he's recently married as well. It looks like as well as me have been enjoying those photos. And Tziraha Zion, we've mentioned a few times your parish. Can you tell us where people can tune in to the past recordings and to future recordings so that they can find all of these English language ministries that we've been referencing?
Yes. So the Tziraha Zion YouTube channel is you'll find that Tziraha Zion, which is spelled T-S-E-R-H-A, Zion, T-S-I-O-N, Saint Mary of Zion. So Tziraha Zion, Saint Mary of Zion is the name of the YouTube channel. And the Facebook page, it's Saint Mary of Zion UK, all one word. So once again, Mary Zion, sorry. Again, the same spelling, Tziraha. With the I-O-N U to the word Zion. So Saint Mary Tziraha Zion UK is the Facebook page, and Tziraha Zion Saint Mary of Zion is the YouTube page. So you can find the past recordings there, and regular services there on Saturdays. We're renting. We're looking forward to having our own building in the future. That's what we're really. The design of the building is based on Axum Zion. It's a renovator converting a cinema into a church based on the architectural design of Axum Zion, commissioned by His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie. So that's what we're working towards, and you can find all of the recordings on those pages there, the YouTube and the Facebook pages.
Thank you so much. በጣም እናመሰግናለን። እግዚአብሔር ይሁበክ ዲያቆን ተስፋ ሚካኤል።
አሜን ወአሜን። ዲያቆን ሄኖክ እግዚአብሔር ጤና ይሁብሊታ።
አሜን አሜን።